The Maui County Charter is a constitutional document defining the responsibilities of local government that reflects the will of the people. In election years, voters in the county decide on proposed changes to the charter. This time around, amendment options include changing the way county council members are elected, how planning is done on each island, as well as how the police commission operates, and more. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yenji Denise. The Maui Charter Commission is reviewing dozens of proposed amendments to give the county's governing policies with the hopes of trimming that list to a manageable number for voters. Some of the proposed changes include the way county council members are elected and abolishing the Maui Planning Commission. Public hearings are scheduled for next week. February 18th is the deadline for the commission to submit its final list of charter amendment questions that will appear for the November ballot. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions. We also encourage you to get involved with our conversation on our Facebook page. Now to our guests. Ashley Olson is a member of the Maui Charter Commission. She teaches at Lahainaluna High School in West Maui and is an active member of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Kauanoe Batangan is also a member of the Maui Charter Commission. He founded the Daniel K. Akaka Congressional Fellowship, a program to ensure Native Hawaiian engagement in policy making. He also volunteers at Common Cause Hawaii and the Maui Historical Society. Dick Mayer taught economics at Maui Community College for 34 years. He has served on the Maui Planning Commission, the Community Plan Advisory Committee, and the General Plan Advisory Committee. He coordinates the Alliance of Maui Community Associations. Albert Perez is the executive director and one of 3 founding members of Maui Tomorrow, a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization. He earned his master's degree in urban and regional planning from UH Manoa. And Ricki Hokama is special assistant to the Maui County Mayor. For over 20 years, Ricki was a Maui County Council member representing the island of Lanai. He also served as the president of the National Association of Counties. Thank you all for being here tonight. Ashley, I want to start with you and just the basics so that our viewers are all on the same page. What is this commission and how did you get involved?
Well, I think you described it beautifully earlier. Every 10 years, a commission is commissioned, comes together. Our council members each put forward a name. Our mayor puts forward a couple of names, and then we sit down and fight like cats and dogs for several months. Not really. We're pretty civil, and we talk about ways that that the government of Maui County can be improved. I think very few people have a really clear idea of exactly how policy and government functions, but we sure all know when it's not functioning well. And so we have input, the community has input, and we try and winnow it down to something that will fit well on a ballot, that the voters can say yes or no.
And Kauanoe, can you expand on that? Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the commission. And I know that, from start to even where it is now, you guys have put forward a lot of questions and then whittled that down. How do you prioritize what actually ends up on the ballot?
Thanks. So I got involved same way as Ashley did. My council member from Kauanoe nominated me, and the rest of the council confirmed me and allowed me to participate in this process. We've been going for about a year now. So we started in March 2021. We held an organizational meeting amongst ourselves to elect a chair and figure out rules and how we're going to conduct business. We then had a series of public hearings to solicit ideas and comments from the public. Ordinarily, those would have occurred in the different districts throughout Maui County, but because of COVID, we did it virtually and had each different meeting focus on a different community plan area throughout Maui County. We received a bunch of proposals, about 150 of them from the public, from various departments and commissions throughout the county, and some were put forth by the commissioners themselves. We then organized those into issue areas and decided which ones we wanted to put forth for further consideration. Ultimately, we decided to adopt 85 individual amendments, and those were then consolidated into about 40 questions that are going to be, they're packaged in a report, and are eventually need to be reviewed again by us and by members of the public.
You know, Dick, I know that you've served on the commissions in years past. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and how, he said they started with over 100, now down to about 40. How many ultimately do you expect to come onto the ballot, and which ones sort of rise to the top?
I was never on the Charter Commission. I've been on a lot of other commissions. I think that they eventually will get down to a number that the public will be able to read and understand, hopefully be able to make wise decisions on. I suspect somewhere between maybe 12 to 18, somewhere around that number, middle teens. I'm hoping they'll be able to consolidate them down. People have used the number 16 as somehow a magic number that people want to get onto. But I think the main point is that some of the 40 that are now sort of consolidated in the initial draft, those will have to be whittled down, combined. I suspect several of them will be thrown out as being not as important or necessary, but I think they'll get it down to a number in the mid-teens. I'm hoping that's what happens. Then it'll be a question of educating the public so that the public will know what they're voting on, why, not only what is going to change, but why it's important to make those changes. I think if I can finish up with that, just the whole process of the Charter Commission is really to upgrade the quality of Maui County government. And as you all know, and we all know, the county has grown so significantly in the past 2 or 3 decades that the structure of the government that met the needs of, let's say, the 1970s, 80s, and 90s may not be adequate to take care of the needs of the future. So that's what we're looking at.
Albert, what do you see as the most important proposal to come forth so far?
Well, it's tough to choose, Yunji. Depends on a number of things. I think that one of the most important is the proposal to get change the way that the Corporation Council is appointed. Right now, they want to. Right now, it's nominated by the mayor and approved by the council, I believe. I have to say, I'm like you. I saw most of these yesterday, and my expertise is in planning, so those are the ones I focused on. But I do think that the way that the Corporation Council has been operating has not been, unfortunately, has not been for the county as a whole. It seems to be operating more as an arm of the mayor, and so a couple of years ago, maybe 2 to 4 years ago, I don't remember exactly, but they actually made an amendment that provided an attorney for the council, Office of Council Services, in response to that. But the way that it's being proposed now, I believe there's going to be an independent selection commission that will nominate people who the mayor can choose from. And I think that will do a lot to help address some of the problems that we've seen with the Corporation Council in the past.
Well, I want to get your expertise on planning, actually.
Right,
if you could talk about that. We alluded to that at the top, that the Maui Planning Commission could be abolished and replaced in a different way. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that proposal and what your thoughts are on it?
Yeah, so the proposal is to create separate planning commissions for each of the community plan districts. And I think that's actually a good proposal. Right now, I think it's proposing that there wouldn't be a Maui Planning Commission. But I like the idea because right now there's no assurance that the Maui Planning Commission is going to have local representation from each of the areas. You could have everybody from Kahului if you wanted to. But this way, and the number of commissioners will be dropped to 7 from the current 9. But if you're getting somebody from each of the different districts, then you're guaranteed to get people who know the local issues. And I think local representation is very, very important.
Ricki, what are your thoughts on that, about this change? Because this is pretty significant.
Well, my view is going to be something a little different from Mr. Perez and Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate they're bringing up this proposal. I'm not too keen about the proposal to create 6 island planning commissions for the Maui Island. I think you're going to have a lot of jurisdictional potential conflict. Are you going to have 6 boundaries for shoreline management policies that could differ from each other? How are you going to address island-wide issues? And I think one of the things that the commission needs to bring forth to the community is, how much do you want us to grow your government, and are you willing to pay for it? And I think the commission, Batangan has asked the auditor to see if they can get some sense of financial or fiscal impact that will cost people like me, who are one of the few taxpayers of this county, what it means to people like me who have to pay part of the bill. And my group is shrinking, as you're well aware, of the middle class, and many of us are tired of carrying everybody else. So I think the cost of the government is going to be a factor in whether or not some of these proposals will go forward.
Kauanoe, can I get your thoughts on that? I am interested in the cost of this, because when you look at all those proposals, and I'm like Albert, I'm looking at the document last night, and it was, I'm not an attorney, so I did my best, but there's a lot on there, and it could cost a significant amount of money to make some of the changes that are on there. Where will the money come from, and what is the sort of consideration of cost in all of this?
Yeah, so the consideration of cost didn't come up very much in our initial discussions, and it's something that we need to look forward, or that we need to consider moving forward. It's part of why I asked the auditor for an evaluation of the current proposals we have before us. And one of the proposals I put forth was to get a cost estimate for each of the future charter amendments. Can I actually add on to the conversation you had about the changes to the Maui Planning Commission?
Of course, please.
Thanks. Yeah, so I actually differ from Mr. Perez on this one. I think in part because we have a Maui Island plan and we need a body responsible for being an authority for implementing that plan, it's important to keep it as it is. I agree with Councilmember Hokama that it will significantly grow the cost of or the size and cost of our government. A lot of these members are going to be volunteers, but we still have to staff each of those 6 commissions that are created. And I just think that decentralized planning is going to lead to a lot of differing rules and regulations across the different community plan areas. I think it makes sense to have regional planning rather than smaller individual sized planning commissions.
Dick, I want to get your thoughts on this. I saw your hand go up there.
Yeah, my hand's up because I was the one who proposed this idea initially to the commission. In the past, Ricki's Island of Lanai has its own planning commission. Molokai has its own planning commission. Hana in remote East Maui has its own advisory body. But the areas where all the changes were taking place, Kahului, South Maui, West Maui, Lahaina area, those areas had no planning commission at all. And so this is an attempt to do what Lanai and Molokai have been able to do for many years now, and that is to regulate and guide their own communities forward. And so by having the separate planning commissions for each of the areas, hopefully better decisions will be made. People talk about the cost side of it, and of course that has 2 elements. Yes, there are dollar costs, but I think there'll be the benefits will far outweigh the cost of manning and serving and sponsoring and working with these various commissions. I don't think it's a huge cost to do it. These can be done virtually. They can be done overnight at nighttime when the general public will be able to better interact. The present planning commission only meets at 9 o'clock in the middle of the week when no working people and residents really can participate. This will allow communities to decide their own future. And as far as costs go, the county has grown considerably. Right now, they've just added their transient accommodations tax to their revenue base. The county overall has grown. The property values have gone up. So yes, it may cost a few $1 million to do all of these things, not just this one, but all of the changes. But I think the county has grown so that this percentage-wise of the budget is not a significant amount compared to the benefits that I think we'll get.
Actually, I'd love to get your thoughts on this proposal and what you've also heard from your fellow commission, the members on the Charter Commission right now on this.
So I just really briefly want to remind everyone that we pay some of the lowest property taxes in the country. And if we were to add a few dollars per $100,000 valuation, then it should still, people should still be able to make ends meet. And we've gone back and forth. I mean, all the points that are being brought up this evening we've gone back and forth. Yeah, it's really important to have local community-based decision making. And yes, there also needs to be a coordinating factor for, at the very least, for the island of Maui, if not for the entire county. So, you know, we go back and forth, and I think ultimately, when we get it into its final version, I do believe absolutely that this is going to ultimately go forward to the ballot. And then it will be up to our community to make that decision for us.
And Albert, I want to give you a chance to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I just, Dick covered part of what I wanted to talk about with the costs, but I'd just like to point out that there is a cost with inappropriate decisions being made by people who don't live in your area. So there's a cost to the community. And the other thing is that, as he also alluded to, these meetings happen during the day, and the public needs to have something that's more accessible. It's hard to get there. And if you want to challenge any of the decisions that they make, it's very difficult for the public. So if there's a bad decision that's made that people can't afford to challenge, that's a cost as well.
Kauanoe, I want to move on to another issue that is sure to draw a lot of headlines with this, and that is changing the way the county council members are elected. Can you explain what this proposed change is and why some folks felt it was important?
I'll start off by giving a little bit of background on why we have the system we do now. So Maui County is fairly unique in that we have 4 islands within our county. And we want to make sure that some of the more remote and smaller populated areas are able to maintain representation. You know, they have historic importance to our county. And that's partially why we don't have district voting as we do now, or as some other counties do. We want to make sure the island of Molokai, the island of Lanai, and the smaller remote region of Hana is able to have a place in the council. But because they're kind of small, it makes it a little bit difficult to ensure democratic representation. And so the system we have now requires every member of the council to run countywide, and then we have district residency requirements. So Hana, Molokai, Lanai are all guaranteed seats. Running countywide does have some problems for democracy though, because each council member is primarily voted in by constituents from outside of their district. And if you live in one of the smaller communities, it's very possible that you win your seat without a single vote from your district. And so the idea of representative democracy is a little challenge there. We wanted to carve the island up into 3 smaller districts with 3 residency areas. And so instead of running countywide and voting for 9 members, a single person would be voting for 3 members within their district. It makes democracy a little bit closer to the individual and allows for people to people's preferences to better be represented in their elected officials.
Ricki, you've served as a representative. Can you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on this proposal?
Well, historically, Maui has tried variations of the council or board of supervisors makeup. We have the at-large of all 9. We've had at times a central multi-member district of 3 members, and then you had 6 members coming from individual districts. But one thing that may say it's a disadvantage to run countywide, because we are such a unique county, and you look at our constitution about trying to maintain the integrity of basic island units. I don't have a problem with the current system, because one thing I can tell you, yes, I was from Lanai, but because I ran countywide, I had the same responsibility to the person in Hana, the person on Molokai, the person on Kula, Lahaina, Wailuku, And I think it made me a better council member because I had to go out to the various districts and know what was the proposed legislation going to do on impacts to community, to their environment. You know, I mean, it's interesting when people get upset with individuals, they're trying to change the structure, they replace the individual, you know. And I'm thinking some of this proposal that I'm seeing is, why are you trying to legislate through the charter? Go to your council and have it done through the ordinance. I think Mr. Mayor brings up a great point. The planning commission should have their members from the various individual residential districts. And the council can do it by ordinance. It doesn't need to be a charter amendment. Just like they've done it through ordinance when I was there. We allowed certain other major commissions like police and fire to ensure representation from small communities. It's through the county code. And so, you know, that's some of my things that I'm going to be discussing with the committee that's been asking me what I thought of the proposals. And I'm going to say that, you know, some of the changes are very good and I'll be supporting it, but some things that I believe is just legislative, I'm going to ask the people to vote no.
Dick, what are your thoughts on this? Would it be better to have this change, or does the way it works now actually work?
Two things. One, as far as the planning commissions, we have to change it in the charter. We can't do it by ordinance because in the charter right now it says there will be a Maui Planning Commission, and so the proposal is to dissolve that single one body for the whole island and create these separate ones. With regard to the election of the members of the county council, the 3 districts, and then having 3 members from each, the reason for that was that it's very difficult for newcomers to get involved in politics, even more so in the county of Maui than perhaps in the other counties, because of the island separation, the distance from Molokai, Lanai, et cetera. And so it's very tough for somebody on Lanai to get known throughout the county. And so the person from Lanai or the person from Molokai is known maybe on their island, but it's very tough for them to run countywide. And so incumbents end up staying in office year after year after year, very often without any real challenge taking place. So this will allow newcomers and new blood, new ideas to get into the council by having these regional areas where people can get elected from. And it's a smaller district to run initially from. And I think that will help keep the council fresh with new ideas.
We've got some viewer questions coming in here, and this is actually a question for you, Kauanoe. What was the reasoning of the commission behind the failure of ranked choice voting that apparently was proposed by you to progress through the process?
Well, that was actually because the commission felt that we were putting forth too many changes at once. They thought that the public would want to be able to have incremental change and be able to digest some of these changes a little bit better.
Okay. Actually, I want to get your thoughts on what we were just talking about the way the council members are chosen. What are your thoughts on changing the way that council members are elected right now?
I think that if it were a perfect system, nobody would have suggested a change. And I think that, is there a perfect system to be had? Probably not. But with the growth in Maui County, which is pretty significant even over the last decade, with various fluctuations because of economics and people leaving and coming back and our influx at this point, maybe it is time to look at alternatives. You know, I've been at Lahaina Luna for long enough that if I would maybe have name recognition in West Maui. And maybe I'd be really good at representing, but the bottom line is the way it is now, who knows me in Hana? And when I say me, I'm not trying to put myself forward like that, but as an example, if you're going to, like I said, if you think that the way that we have, the system we have right now is perfect, and this amendment makes it to the ballot, vote no.
Ricki, I want to get your thoughts on Eric's question. He's writing in from South Maui. He says, what are the risks in making wholesale changes to the county charter? What do you think for Eric?
I would say one, I hope commission would really go and get very sound, solid legal advice and comment. Because when you do wholesale changes, there will be some areas of potential conflict. Implementation schedule of those changes. And if someone is unhappy enough, I can see this going to court and being challenged at the courts.
And Dick, same question. What is your response to Eric? What are the risks in making wholesale changes to the county charter? Why is this fight worth it?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking you.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, no, I think there should be some changes. I think that we need to keep up with the changes that are happening on the island, and I'm willing to go out to the public and say, we think that these are good ideas. Do you agree with us on making some of these changes? I think we're looking at a number of the important people in the county government: the prosecutor, the corporation counsel, the auditor, the county clerk, and redefining their roles in county government. Yes, it's a lot of things, but unfortunately, we only have a charter commission that meets every 10 years. I think it would be nice if they parcel these out every 2 years, and 3 or 4 come every 2 years. We could study, but that's not the structure we have. And so we have to do it in this manner. So it sounds like a lot, but in fact, it probably won't be until 2032 that we end up doing this all over again. And who knows what will happen by then.
And to that point, Ashley, there are 2 questions here. One from Bob, who says, where can Maui residents go to see the proposed changes? And another one on our Facebook page from a viewer in Upcountry Maui who says, how can the public get involved before this process is finalized? We talked at the very top about some public hearings that are happening, but how does the public get involved, especially with the challenges of coronavirus and trying to be socially distanced, but also have their voice heard before this actually gets on the ballot?
So there are a couple of things. There is a Charter Commission page on the county website, and anticipating a question like this, I wrote down, it is mauicounty.gov/1791/charter-commission. And you can find agendas, minutes, testimony, and other supporting documents, as well as links to various meetings. Meetings are online through Blue Jeans, and certainly the public is invited. And one of the things that has been mentioned a couple of times is the difficulty of participating when a meeting is at 9 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. I'm still teaching. It has at times been very, very challenging to make these meetings, and I think that's something that we absolutely do need to address. The video conferencing has made it a little bit easier for people from all over the county to be able to offer testimony or more information. But let's starting to meet later in the evening. Our next 2 meetings are January 26 and 27 from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then we'll go back to a meeting schedule that hasn't been determined yet, but it will be at mauicounty.gov/1791/charter-commission.
Okay, and remember, you can always go back to our Facebook page or to our website and rewatch this video. And so, if you missed that website, you go back and rewatch just this portion right here, right about the half of the show. Kauanoe, I want to ask you, when you're looking at all of these proposals, is there any concern that you could overwhelm voters with too much choice and that people don't necessarily participate because it just seems like, how do I know? I can't decide. I'm just not going to vote.
It's definitely a concern. It's something we talk about a lot. And one of the things that we, know we need to address and will address. The next steps are going to be those public hearings on the 26th and 27th. If you have strong feelings about proposals and aren't able to attend, you can also send an email to charter.commission@mauicounty.gov. So you're able to send those. We'll receive them before the meeting, and take your comments into consideration. But that's the next step, is those public hearings. We won't reconvene till after that. So we'll get public input, and then based on that input, make our determinations onto what provisions we want to reconsider or revise.
Okay. And Dick, I know that you put forth a number of proposals. What sort of is driving? I know that you said that a lot of residents, there's a lot of new residents in Maui County. What do you see as the biggest challenge to the way government is functioning on your or in your county right now?
Well, we're already addressed several of them. The way people are elected, the planning commission, those are major decision-making bodies for the island. And then with streamlining, I think there's several things in the county government to make them more responsive to the changes that are taking place. I just want to add, let me go back to something that was just said in the last section about how can the public get involved. What will happen is on the 18th of February, the commission will be sending its draft to the council. The council then will hold hearings on that, and that's definitely a place where the general community, and I think there'll be some evening meetings probably as well by the council, and then they will make recommendations, and if they differ from what the Charter Commission has said, it goes back to the Charter Commission, and we won't have a final document probably till May or June later on this year, and it will not be on the primary ballot. It will actually be on the general ballot in November. So I think that there'll be plenty of time, and I think there'll be a real effort made. The Planning Commission has hired a consulting firm to do the promotion, the advertising, explaining why these changes are being recommended. So I think the public will get informed, and then it'll be up to the public to respond to what they're hearing.
Albert, I want to go back to this proposed change on the Planning Commission because I think it is so significant. What about this idea that if you had all these different commissions essentially, governing their own communities, that you could have such varied, codes or requirements, and that, you'd have one community looking one way and one another way, and that there wouldn't be a cohesiveness to the county?
Well, it's not that there would be different code. There is one Maui County code, but you would get a different take on it from each planning commission. I do think that it'd be good to have some kind of like a council of maybe the chairs of the planning commissions that could meet and coordinate this kind of thing. There does need to be local representation and local input. So I think it is a benefit. The other alternative, though, is the other proposal, and I don't know if you're going to go into that, but there's a proposal to create community boards that are similar to the neighborhood boards. So if you're going to get to that, I can wait till then. But
oh no, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I have actually grew up on Oahu and participated as a lowly citizen who didn't really know how to access the county government down in Honolulu, and we made changes at the local neighborhood board on the North Shore. It was wonderful. We wanted to preserve a public access that was proposed to be closed. We went around the community, we got petition, and we went to the neighborhood board, and they endorsed it. And then it went to the the city council. And so they, in my opinion, they pay more attention to something that's a proposal from the neighborhood board. It also serves as a way for people to get into politics if they want to on a more local level. So it's kind of an entry level political thing, see how they like it. And the other really important thing is that the planning commissions are restricted to planning related issues. The neighborhood boards are not necessarily, in fact, I was looking at the state law, and it talks about how you can bring things up as a citizen that are not even on the agenda. So there's an agenda item for things that are not on the agenda. I really like that. So people, if they're concerned about that, like we were, you can make a change without having to build up all this public support at the city council level, or in our case, at the county council level. So that's an alternative. I wouldn't want to see both the community boards and the planning commissions. I think that would be too much. But one of the two, I think, would be a really good idea.
Ricki, I see you nodding your head. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for those comments, Albert. I tend to agree with some of the comments you made, especially regarding the neighborhood boards. I think I could be more supportive of that than 6 planning commissions for the Maui Island. And if I'm not mistaken, Yanjin, one of the advantages I see of the neighborhood board process that Oahu has is that the neighborhood board members are elected by their peers or the community. They're not appointed for the Charter Commission and whatnot. So, I could go with that. Just like in the future, I could go with a Charter Commission that is elected by the public.
Hey, talk a little bit about that. Why do you think that that would be a better system?
Well, there's so much cynicism in the world nowadays, why is this non-elected person going to make proposals or selection of individuals for a position or whatnot? Just like at the Constitutional Convention, we're all elected as delegates to serve. We put ourselves before the community, and they chose who they wanted to send to the convention, the 102 delegates. I don't see why we cannot do that for the Charter Commission too. If they want to serve, let them run and put themselves up just like we do who want to be in elective public service and go through that process. Because right now, if I read it right, the proposal, there's going to be potentially 4 new departments, 19 new boards and commissions. And I can tell you in this county from the feedback that I receive, since I was part of the government one time, are we moving backwards to a board of supervisors mentality that we came from before the charter? And second, people are just having a hard time continuing to serve if they have to go through an inquisitional process for approval. So, it's going to be interesting how the community responds to this new 19 new boards and commissions, since right now we're having a hard time filling the existing boards and commissions by people who feel that the process is not quite equitable enough for them to put their name and family forward to give voluntary service.
Ashley, I know this is still a work in progress, but what about that potential criticism that this is perhaps too large an expansion of government and the cost that comes with it?
Well, then we probably shouldn't increase the cost of electing Charter Commission members either then. But, yes, things do cost money. They do. And it's not a done deal that we're going to add all of those boards and commissions. And I guess I have a lot of faith in voters. And it's been pointed out to me that maybe sometimes I have too much faith. But as an educator, I have to have faith that people will learn and people will reach out and people will support their community. And that I want to segue a little bit. There have been multiple comments this evening about, well, I'm not an expert, but I'm not an attorney, but neither am I. And there is so much that I still don't know that I feel a little bit like a dilettante. I feel like I have learned so much from my fellow Charter Commission members. I've learned so much from Dick Mayer and others. But the bottom line is that I saw that this was an opportunity to get involved in my local government in a way that wasn't going out and campaigning. But I saw an opportunity to continue to serve my community. And it's a learning curve. It's a steep learning curve. And I'm still climbing that learning curve. But had I decided that, well, I just don't know enough, I can't put my name forward, then I've got no room to complain. And we absolutely need to make these boards, et cetera, more accessible to the public, having evening meetings, weekend meetings, et cetera. But if we let the fear of a lawsuit prevent us from putting something forward to try and improve local government, then why bother? Why bother? You've got to try, you've got to strive. That's why you've got people like Dick saying, you know what, this is not really working very well for everyone. Let me see if I can make an improvement. It comes forward to the commission, we argue about it, we talk about it, and then, yes, we get to decide whether or not it goes forward to voters. And again, ultimately, it's our voters who will decide whether something happens or not. And that's what democracy is supposed to be, by the people, for the people, of the people.
Well, let's talk about some of those 40 plus proposed changes. I want to get to Kauanoe on this one. There's a question here. There was a proposed requirement for the police chief to possess a bachelor's degree. Considering the power of police officers, shouldn't this requirement apply to them as well? This is a basic requirement for far less lethal professions. Talk a little bit about the proposed changes to the role of the chief.
There was a proposal put forth to increase the amount of years on service that were required for people being considered for chief and to have a bachelor's degree. This is one that I actually really struggled with because we didn't want to prohibit qualified people from being considered. I think when we were doing our deliberations, we learned that the police department actually has a program for members to get a bachelor's degree. And so if people knew that they wanted to become chief or be considered for chief in the future, that they would need to take this step and be able to have the means to do so. And so I think that's why the commission was willing to move forward with it. But it really was a hard one for us to grapple with. You know, we understand that not everybody has a luxury of going to a four-year college, that it could be cost prohibitive for a lot of families in the island. And we didn't want people to just be disqualified because of it. You know, we felt that the commission could have latitude to consider other things that might make up for it. But I think because they have a path to earn a degree while on the force, we felt comfortable approving this proposal.
Dick, I want to get your thoughts for Natalie writing in from Kahului tonight. She says, are the proposed amendments doing enough to address the cost of living and affordable housing? I know that you put forth a number of the proposed changes. What do you say to Natalie on that question?
That's a good question, because the commission is now recommending that we have one department in the county that be split up and divided into two. That's the Department of Housing and Human Concerns. That is a huge department, and it deals with all kinds of issues, everything from the rental support to social issues of various kinds, as well as housing in general. So by separating out, they're now going to create, or proposing to create, a separate department called the Housing Development, Department of Housing Development. And its purpose will be purely to get new housing built that it will be affordable for the general public. That would involve buying land, or in some cases where a developer comes in and says they want to put up a particular project, hotel or shopping center, they would perhaps be asked as part of the requirements that they also provide land for the county then to use for affordable housing. And it would be a separate department. So I think that's an excellent idea, because right now that component of the Department of Housing and Human Development has just not been happening. And the department has not been developing the housing. And that's one reason why we have the enormous affordable housing problems on Maui. But let me raise the two other recommendations that the commission are making that I think should be really brought to people's attention. And they involve two different selection committees. One of the proposals is to create something called independent selection commission that would nominate the people for the very important administrators in the county, the prosecutor, the corporation counsel, the county clerk, auditor, etc. And that committee would be a sort of an elite committee appointed, made up of people, 7 people, with the mayor appointing 2, the council appointing 2, the local attorneys on the island, the Bar Association appointing 2, and the chief judge here on Maui appointing the one person. So it's a 7-member body, and they would meet whenever there's an opening in the auditor or prosecutor or corporation. So it would take it out of the political hands as being an appointment by the mayor and make it much more of an independent group. The other commission, a body that was set up, would be a nominating committee to nominate people for all the various boards and commissions. This is something I was chair of about 15 years ago for 4 years under one of the previous mayors. And it worked extremely well. We were able to recruit and get people to run. And right now, it's left up to one person, usually in the mayor's office, an executive assistant, to go out and find people for boards and commissions. This would be a nominating committee, and they would not select the final person. They would screen people, they would recruit. And I'll give 1 or 2 examples. One is that for example, one of the commissions needs an engineer. Well, we may not have any engineers applying for boards. And so our job will be go out and try to find some engineer. Another one is we have one taking care of certain animal issues and we need a veterinarian. And we, again, would go out and try to find somebody to fill that position and use the staff. So these are two very important commissions that will help make the county, I think, run much more effectively.
Well, Ricki, I want to get your thought on that first one, the Independent Selection Committee. Obviously, you work closely with the mayor. What do you think about stripping those responsibilities from that office and putting it in this Independent Selection Committee?
I think Ashley kind of put it all together in her earlier comment about, we all wish there was a perfect structure and perfect, way to operate government and get people involved with taking away as much of a so-called politicalness. But, government is a political entity, politics is everywhere. It's in your PBS, it's in legislature, it's in daily life. I mean, you can't get away from politics. Maybe we could try that. Just like how the state has moved to a independent judicial selection committee to forward potential judges' names forward. But I still would like to have an elected at the end of the day, held accountable that I can either re-elect or boot out of office if I'm not too happy with decisions made. How to go after an appointed person who has no real accountability back to me or the public.
Kauanoe, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I just want to correct the record on a couple of things. One is that the model was based off of the Judiciary Selection Committee, and it's not members appointed by the Chief Justice or by the Bar Association. It would be the president of the Bar Association and it would be the Chief Justice participating directly. The second thing is that we're not taking it out of an elected official's hands. They would be responsible for recruiting and then screening candidates and then setting forth a couple names to the mayor for his appointment and then nominate or confirmation by the council. So it would still go through elected officials and they would have some accountability to the public for their selections.
Tell us a little bit about why the Charter Commission thought this was an important thing to bring up in the first place, though. I mean, what's wrong with the way it's being done now?
Actually, do you remember this discussion? Do you want to weigh in on this one?
I'm not sure what I had for breakfast this morning right now. So, the blanket response to that is that every single thing that's been brought forward was because there was a perceived problem or a perceived inequity. And quite honestly, some of those things were so incredibly specific that they didn't move forward at all. But whether there are fundamental problems, there is a perception that a problem exists or that there is a system that should and can be improved. And so I realize that's not a specific answer, but that's ultimately where it came from.
Albert, I want to get to talk a little bit more about splitting the Department of Housing and Human Concerns. What's your take on putting those departments into separate categories?
I think that's a great idea, and the reason is because I feel like the human concerns are more immediate. They're right in front of us, and they're always taking our attention. The housing development is more of a long-term thing, and it seems to be kind of put on the back burner because people aren't starving right in front of you. Right now, the way that the Department of Housing and Human Concerns deals with affordable housing proposals pretty much is that they're just waiting for developers to propose 201H projects that are exempt from county zoning, county community plans. That is not planned growth. That is kind of sitting back and letting things happen. There's no creativity that I can see that's coming from the Department of Housing and Human Concerns with regard to proposals for affordable housing. And I would hope that that would change with Department of Housing Development.
Ricki, you've sort of been the voice of perhaps not expanding government, not adding all of these changes in the same way. What's your thought on this specific one about splitting this department from 1 into 2?
You know, I would agree that, the county has had poor results over the past decades regarding the affordable housing units that needs to be constructed by Eugene. So I'm willing to try something different, but just creating a separate department for housing is not the answer. Most of us know that the problem really is within the connectivity to the other departments that needs to review and sign off on permits. Will the water department do a timely review and sign off of permits? Will Public Works do a timely review? Will the planning department? There's, Albert and, Dick and everyone else knows the process to get the building permit or the approval of the construction is a long path. And unless we have someone at the helm, they will find a way to improve how we can short the time it takes to get the approvals. You're not going to see the houses built even if we get one separate housing department. But I think it can be done. I think we need to make some adjustments to the code and make some adjustments on the permitting process so that we can give answers yes or no to a development sooner than later, because for everybody, time is money.
And our time flies over here. We have just about 5 minutes left in our program, and I want to get to each of you. So if we could keep your answers brief, but I just wanted to get your final thoughts. What do you say to your fellow citizens as they consider these proposals and they start to, I'm sure there are some folks who are watching tonight who may not have even been aware of this. Kauanoe, we'll start with you. What's your final thought tonight?
I want to say that those of us who participated in this process did so because we love this community and we want to help to solve some of the problems that we see in our neighborhoods. But we can't do it alone and we need your help. So we really do encourage you to participate in those public hearings, write in if you can't, make your voices heard when it comes to the council. And then when it finally goes to the ballot, we need your participation throughout this process. It's not something that's done in a vacuum. It's meant to be collaborative and we really would love to have you participating.
Okay, and Dick, what do you say to your fellow Maui County residents tonight?
I would thank them for paying attention tonight, listening to a program like this. I think it's the first step. But I hope that in the fall, when all the things are finally ready to be put on the ballot, that they will really pay attention and try to figure out why a particular item is on there, what it will do, what kind of effect it will have. And these are really long-term things. This is not like a vote, okay, this is this year's annual budget. When they change the charter, it's going to change the county in some significant ways for years into the future, till eventually another charter commission modifies. So these are important, and I hope that people take them seriously and try to figure out not just their personal interest, but what will it be like for their children and grandchildren down the road, and how will Maui County be better if they vote yes, or better if they vote no?
Okay, Albert?
When you asked that question, Yunji, the first thing that came to my mind was no vote, no grumble. But that's kind of a negative take on it. I'd like to put a positive spin on it. If you do participate, you can make a difference. And that is what Maui Tomorrow tries to do, is help people to understand the process of government, how to vote, why it makes a difference, educate people. And it's urgent because we're getting to the point where people are having to leave this island because, like recently I just read that, again, more than half of the homes that were bought here in Maui County were from outside of Hawaii, I believe, out of state. So let's make a difference while we still can.
Okay, and Ricki?
My comments to our community is that you need to participate. Whatever changes are proposed and passed by the voters of our county is going to impact your life. It's going to impact your wallet and your pocketbook, and it'll impact how you live and work in this county. So I ask that you participate and that we all remember we have the most unique county. We have a multi-island county, and that is something we need to remember, as well as the cultural history of how our county operated from the past, the kingdom days, the territory days, and why certain political districts was always done from the days of the chiefs.
Okay, and Ashley, we're going to give you the last
History on
word.
that. Thank you.
I'm not sure that was the best choice, but thank you. So a couple of things. It's incumbent upon our local government to ensure that residents and citizens can participate. Without that, we're doomed. And the other thing, as a registered voter, as a resident, a taxpayer, if I had let fear of not being an expert hold me back, then I wouldn't have been able to participate. And you do your best with the information that you have, and then just like the charter, you try and massage it and make it better. I've made mistakes. I'll continue to make more, but I'm going to try and improve. And that's all we want. We all just want to live happily ever after.
And we will have to leave it there.
Is participating, right?
That's right. Well,
And
thank you so
kind
much.
to your citizens.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Of course, we do thank our guests, Ashley Olson from the Maui Charter Commission, Kauanoe Batangan from the Maui Charter Commission as well, Dick Mayer, former economics professor and community advocate, Albert Perez, executive director of Maui Tomorrow, and Ricki Hokama, special assistant to the mayor. Next week, right here on Insights, once again, state lawmakers are talking about raising the minimum wage. So what will it be and when will that happen? Please do join us then. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.